All right, and we are recording. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our special edition of Corporate Life is Hell. We are recording this on the 20th of January, 2016. Happy New Year. We've got a special guest today, Chris Hutchinson. But before I introduce him, I wanted to remind people of what this show is about. A lot of us as corporate employees and even corporate leaders have experienced that corporate life can indeed be hell. Politics and lack of empowerment and frustrations and job difficulties and all kinds of things. And so we believe that the way out of this is through leadership. But it starts with leadership of yourself, rather than talking about the guys upstairs who are all messed up and are too clueless to know what's really going on down at my level. The fact is that the only thing that we can affect is our own behavior. So that's what the leadership is that we talk about on this show. Mike Karakulis is not able to be here today. He had a conflict come up, and so he designated me the host for today. So I am honored to introduce Chris Hutchinson. I've known Chris for a few years. He's here in Northern Colorado along with me. And he's the author of a new book called Ripple. Hopefully that's showing up in the right direction. On mine it's in mirror image, but yeah,
it's good. It looks good.
Yeah, you know what your book looks like, Chris, right? So, Chris, why don't you introduce yourself? Let us know who you are, and I'd be interested to know why you wrote the book.
Okay, great. Thanks, Carl. I'm glad to be here. Sorry Mark can't join us. I had a good conversation with him a few weeks ago, and of course he's off serving some client somewhere.
That's right.
Priorities. But so unless I'm in an audience of all engineers, I like to introduce myself as a recovering engineer, because they don't really appreciate that recovering part. They're like, recovering from what? Recovering from what? Actually, so I've had a career that did include a stint inside the corporate hell, and got to experience a lot of those politics. I also was an Air Force officer for 8 years, so another big bureaucratic organization, but trying to focus on something good. And I took those experiences and really have developed the company, 2002, so it's 14 years old next month. Started in the Boston area, moved out to Fort Collins back home in 2004. So we've been here for like 12 years.
Wonderful.
And we're really, I get this great fortune of working with organizations, with the leaders around how they're being effective or not, how teams, what they need to do to step up to the challenges at hand, and even including helping the organizations figure out what is that challenge that we're all going towards, rather than you do your work, I'll do mine. So how to help organizations work together, and then the teams and leaders get there, is really what we do. So I'm really lucky at that. And the reason I wrote the book, it's a great question, is because I would go into a client, and our methodology is really to build on what's there. We don't want to come in and replay. It's not a religion. It's sort of like, what are you doing? What do you know? Where are the holes? Where are you having some challenges? And we try to help them with those places where they get you some help in the direction they want to go. And I found that clients frequently had taken on this program or that method or read this book, and they were using those pieces, but they didn't really integrate. Mm-hmm. They didn't really fit together well. And so there was actually clashes that were between the things they were trying to do. They were very teamwork oriented, and then they were using a sales system that was pretty individualistic. And so they weren't working together well. Or they would see themselves as, I needed to kind of, make sure the people were running well and the system should take care of themselves. And that didn't work so well. And then of course, folks also had the part where even as the leader, they didn't realize how much they needed to work on themselves, because whatever they did would ripple into the organization. And that's where the book came from. How to ripple out positively to the team, the organization, and then your clients and their clients, and how far can you get that stone out in the pond?
Excellent. Yeah. And, I know that a lot of the work that you do is with business leaders. And so you work a lot with people on their management style and leadership attributes, setting direction, all this good leadership kind of stuff. And that's great. And so I was really intrigued when you started off the book talking about self-leadership, and that's why I thought you might be great to come on this show here. You know, so tell me about what is your take on self-leadership and how it relates to somebody especially who doesn't like having anybody reporting to them?
That's awesome. That's a great question. So my take on self-leadership is parallels what you said, is the only thing you really can control is you, even though we tend to see the challenges out there and we see it in other people and how they're messing up. Typically, those are reflections of the things we're struggling with inside. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not a psychologist. I haven't even taken a psychology class, but I just seen this pattern in myself. When I would be really pissed off about something, it was like my subconscious brain was slapping my conscious brain trying to say, okay, I'm not getting attention in here. I'll just start pointing out all those things where the person is being inconsiderate or they're being greedy or things like this, and it kind of pisses you off because you're doing it too. Mm-hmm. So knowing how you show up, whether or not you have people reporting to you or you just have peers or leadership goes all directions. I think the leadership up is fairly easy and leadership down is fairly easy. So leadership sideways is hard because we don't think it's our job to help lead our peers. And yet the way I show up in a meeting, the things that I do, the amount of respect that I pay other people in a meeting or in an organization or on a project team is going to completely affect our end result. So the two pieces that I have, I've got three different ripples. There's that self piece, there's the team piece or others, and then there's the organizational piece. And then the self piece, there's two ripples essentially in there, two principles. And one of them is really around that my effectiveness is proportional to how well I know myself as a leader or as a team player. And then the second one is that I'm judged more by what I don't than by what I do.
So what do you mean by that?
And so, well, that one is that if I take action and it turns out to not be right as a leader or even as a participant, usually I'm going to get more slack than if I miss an opportunity.
Okay.
I don't address bad behavior. Like if I address bad behavior and I do it poorly or I do something like that, people will be like, well, at least he tried. Okay. At least he did something. But if I just sit and let bad behavior happen in the organization or I even tolerate it for myself, I'm not in those difficult conversations and doing things on me. Like it's one thing to know where I am and say, okay, here's my strengths, here's where I'm going, this is what I value. Those are the pieces of knowing. I said, if I know those, I can set them aside in a conversation and have a real good conversation with you or somebody else in respect. If I don't, I just inflict them on you. You either like me and you're a good person or you're not like me and you're a problem. So, but if I know what my strengths are, I can put those aside or use them, apply them well. And when I know what those strengths are in action, I'll be able to do them at the right level. I won't overdo them. I won't underdo them. I'll find that sweet spot where I'm applying my strengths to the place that's going to help other people.
And I do see.
So I think that's anybody.
A lot of people do give you credit for trying. The fear of making a mistake holds us back. It's like, oh, I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to screw up. And so you end up doing nothing. And people judge you pretty harshly in that case. Whereas if you go out and you give it a fair go and you miss the mark a little bit or even a lot, I find that people tend to be fairly tolerant, especially if you have a deeper relationship with them. And it's not all just about the transaction of, okay, I was supposed to do this job and I either did it or I did not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I overdo my strength and I just slam it at people and said, hey, I'm a dominant personality, therefore you got to live with it. That's a little different. I mean, I think it's knowing that and trying to, maybe even if I never tried to temper that to help other people, that would be what people would say. You didn't do that. I mean, we're more motivated by loss just as humans. And like, for instance, when when I see a sale, I'll go, oh, that's kind of cool. And then like the day before the sale, I'll go, I'm going to miss out. I'm going to miss that opportunity, and so I might take action because they've done work where they do the brain scans while people are interacting. Right. And they find that there's 3 times more activity of potential loss than a potential gain.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yes. So it's a thing where then marketers do this all the time. They'll hand you something when you walk in the store. Would you like this? If you take it and then say, oh, can I have that back? You'll go, no. But if you say, would you like this? I'll go, nah. So it's something to just understand that people are way more motivated by the negative, just as a kind of a base, probably survival instinct thing. And the positive, well, we have to exert ourselves to get there. It's a challenge to say, well, what's good about this and how can I go there? What's the possibility? Because all that fear says, but you could screw up. And it paralyzes you. Leaders are those who can walk through that paralysis, have courage in the midst of fear, and keep moving. And other people will follow as a result. Whether that's your colleague or your boss might say, hey, you're for this? Great,
yeah,
I'm too.
Cool. So I wanted to press into one thing. You said that leadership upward is easy. And, my experience is that a lot of people don't believe that statement, that's pretty outrageous to think that managing your boss or leading your boss is an easy thing to do. So I'd be interested to know, why did you think that it's easy? Are you crazy or what?
It could be that I'm crazy. I think it's much clearer. There is an expectation that you're supposed to provide feedback to your boss. You're supposed to take action, report back. The expectations of the role are much clearer. The expectation that you would influence your peers is like, what? Just get your job done and don't bother me. I mean, I've had people when teams would set joint goals, and this was an engineer, and he goes, look, for 5 years, we established the goals, I hit them. This goal, I have to work with somebody, this is crap. I can't guarantee that this is there. I'm very uncomfortable. You're taking away my success. When the very problem was they were all stovepiping, and it was like, well, I did my job and you didn't do yours, so you screwed up. Not, we're losing as a company. So that's peers. But so the other thing is, it depends on your definition of leadership. If leadership is about influencing and being vulnerable and being open and respecting and enabling the best in somebody, I think leading up is very easy. If leadership is telling people what to do and hitting people with a stick, you're gonna do that like once, maybe twice with a leader, and then boom, you're out.
Excellent.
So it depends on your definition of leadership. Like if I think of developing my subordinate and helping them be successful, and I use all those same qualities with my peers and up, we all win. We all win. That's the kind of leadership.
Okay, so I like that, because most people think that leadership and management is around telling people what to do. And so therefore you've got to have that power on the org chart to be able to tell people what to do, because that's what org charts are for. And what you're saying is that let's think of leadership really in the way of, how do you get people to align around what you'd like to have happen, the ideas you have, and how do you exercise influence, in which case it can go any direction. It can be within your family.
My kids have led me in terms of helping me learn things. And if you see it as an interactive relationship where it's not there's authority clearly, right? There's clearly authority that, hey, you're out of here. But if you see it as, I have this picture in the book, and I have this little people kind of standing around this rim, and there's a leader in the middle. And then every one of those people has sort of a rope tying from the leader to the person. This is the genius with 1,000 helpers model. I've heard this is Steve Jobs' model. Other people, like, I just pull and you respond. And then when I'm not there, it's chaos. Nobody knows, there's no relationships. We don't know what to do, right? If instead you have the leader on the outside edge of this rim, building relationships with each person and encouraging people to do the same, you can imagine you end up with this net, this interwoven web of connections. And the leader steps away, there's still a resilient thing to hold the organization together. So a lot of it depends on your perspective of what leadership is about. Oh, I was going to share one thing. So in the Air Force, and I think it actually helped me. I know I got jobs with more responsibility because I did this. I did what I call, somebody I think taught me, active dissent. Okay. Active dissent goes like this. So I hear a decision is going to be made, or perhaps it is made, or there's talking about it, and I think, ooh, I have some information here that would say that's not the best decision, and I'd probably recommend a different course. If somebody asked me, I could sit around and wait, or I could take a leadership role. And I asked for time with the boss, and they have a very hierarchical structure, right? I'm talking to somebody with literally rank on their shoulder that says, I'm 4 levels above you. And I asked for permission, closed the door, came in, and said, I'd like to discuss with you, give you my perspective on this, because I'm worried that you might, this may not be the best call. And I want to make sure that you have all the information, knowing in my mind that leaders don't really always hear dissenting points of view. In fact, it's very hard for them because people don't come to them and tell them things. So I'm helping lead my boss. I shared my perspective, and I get 1 to 2 answers. Yeah, considered that. Thanks for bringing it in. Carry on. And I'm like, okay. And I support the decision completely. I didn't go and say, well, I said it was a bad call. I just said, yeah, this is what we're going to do. And there were some times when I would share it and, oh my gosh, we didn't know that. Well, that's really helpful. Thanks so much. And in fact, I think we're probably going to change, keep your ears out and listen for what's going to happen, because we're probably going to change that. That is a leadership role. That's not passive, like, they're going to do whatever they have to me. I was saying what my perspective was respectfully and allowing that authority to then make a decision based on that.
Yeah, the respect for people's need to make decisions is kind of an important thing that I think a lot of folks don't recognize, that when you work for somebody, they have the responsibility to make larger, more comprehensive decisions, things that affect your life, but things about running the group and whatever. Right. Part of your role is to respect that, not in what I would call a subservient way, saying, I have no value to add, you are king, I am slave. Not that kind of thing, but more like my job is to offer advice, viewpoints, options, things like that. Then your job is, as manager, is to make the decision, and then I will do my best to line up with that. Given that my input has been heard and considered, then I respect your ability, and it's your job to make decisions.
Exactly. I think it's role, not necessarily so much. I mean, there's authority difference, but it's what's our role to be, and we're both serving the mission. Like, what is the business need is one of the things that I frequently share with leaders that really helps them, because otherwise we get caught in, well, this person's having problems with this and I can't change. It's like, well, what does the business need? Like one of the questions that I put in the book, Andy Grove, and Moore's Law guy, Gordon Moore, I think is his name. They were talking about what would, should Intel get out of memory or not, and they went out and kind of had a breather, and then one of them turned to the other and said, well, what would our successor do? What would our replacement, oh yeah, we get out of memory like that. Okay, well, let's make that decision before our successor does, And so I think it's about thinking about what does the organization need, and then how am I serving that? Mm-hmm. I think is a big part of leadership. So I think leader, in my definition, you can see the leader is everybody. Anybody can have a leadership role in influencing others and how they show up. And I mean, you've been on teams where somebody, I'm guessing, where somebody set a standard that other people stepped up to, even though they didn't have formal authority to do so.
Yeah, and I think some people might get confused if we say that everybody's a leader. Everybody's a leader, therefore nobody's a leader. We got chaos and things like that. When I work with people on this, I tend to focus on there's a million domains that need leadership, large and small, and tightly connected and independent. There's a million things that need leadership. And so if you abdicate your role in the areas where you can add value, then don't be surprised when other people step in and make decisions that are dumb and counter to what you think you might want to do and is best. And actually, it's your job. It should be in your job description to be making decisions around certain things. Now, it's not necessarily worded that way. I understand. But, if your job is to do X, then the implication is that the decisions about how to do X or how to optimize it or to make trade-offs, things like that within that little box, you should do that, or you're not really adding value. You're just turning the crank.
Yeah, and I think that that same sort, and I appreciate that it's not formal leadership, but if I'm not leading me, who is? Yeah. So that's everybody. And as I go into where I have a responsibility to lead other people, that's a different kind of thing, and it's not just a better spreadsheet. As I had one leader saying, I don't know this vision and teamwork crap, and this is with 20 people in the room, senior leader in charge of a $1 billion factory, and he's like, we just need a better spreadsheet. If everybody just does their job really well, we get it. And his team, to their credit, said, actually, that's not what we want to be here for. We want to know that those folks over there are willing to sacrifice something for our greater good, and maybe I get a gain or maybe I get a loss, but together is what we're doing. It's not you just do your job, you do your job.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say he was an engineer's engineer, and he was just like, and he was being very transparent and vulnerable. He's like, I don't get it. I'll we just, let's just manage for results, and then everything takes care of itself. I don't think so.
Right. Yeah. So let me ask you. One of the things that people struggle with is the belief that their boss is not listening, cannot really be influenced very much. Maybe he's an idiot. And therefore, my life is corporate hell because, this guy is controlling my life and he's doing dumb things. So what do you advise people in that kind of situation about how do I work on myself and how do I change that situation?
So I'll go back to the Gandhi quote, the be the change you want to see in the world. People talk about that in the lofty sense. That's really what it comes down to. Give you an example. Had a guy, same kind of situation. I actually was on a 3-hour car ride with him from Dallas to Waco, Texas. And he was spent most of that time giving me the story about why things were crappy and why the boss wouldn't do things. And the boss wasn't listening to him, and the boss wasn't crediting his ideas. He would never compliment him. And I heard this, and I was being open to it because that was his experience. And then we got to a pause, and I said, I'd like to ask you a question. When's the last time you did any of those things to your boss? And we drove for about 5 minutes in silence for some hours. And he very quietly said, I've never done that. I said, well, it's one way to try. So if you complimented the boss and saying, thank you for that insight, that really was helpful. Or we're really actively listening and saying, let me understand, I think you said this, basically it takes two to tango. And if you model, as a leader should, I think, leading yourself, if you model the behavior you want to see, there's a thing called a human reciprocity theorem, which says essentially if we model it, we'll get it back. It doesn't always happen, but certainly that's a good place to start.
Right.
So when he started doing that, and about a couple of weeks later, we talked, and he said, I complimented him, and he was floored. He looked at me like, are you serious? And the guy said, no, it helped me because, and I gave him the recipe for a good compliment is, here's the behavior specifically you did. This is the reason it helps me. Here's the reason that it's going to help me in the future. And here's the reason it's going to connect to the mission. If you do those things rather than, hey, nice job, keep it up, you'll get that behavior again. And he did. He got that same behavior from his boss. So he was leading his boss in a respectful way just by the way he was trying to make the change. It was also, he admitted to me, pretty humbling because he realized that the boss was probably just reciprocating what he was doing.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I've had a principle for many years that, hey, we're all just human, and most people are just doing the best job they can with the information that they're given. Absolutely. And, having that kind of, and it sounds kind of wimpy. Just like, well, yeah, let's all just stand around and sing Kumbaya and have fun and love each other and everything. But the fact is, it's incredibly applicable when you're getting into these contentious situations to say, imagine that person is just doing the best they can. They're just a human, and you may be having a crappy day at home as well on top of that, and that's why they bit your head off. Imagine that situation, and guess what? Your heart softens, and you start thinking, well, okay, so maybe I can work with this. Maybe there's a different kind of conversation we need to have because right now we're butting heads, and it's this style thing is getting to us. So maybe it's about changing the conversation, but it tends to increase the creativity that you have.
Yeah, there's 6 principles I have in the book, and the first 2 are that knowing yourself and getting in action as a leader. The second 2 are really around respect and enablement by a leader of others. And so the third principle is people discover their best selves by being respected by a leader. You could say respected by anyone. but I believe that. And one of the sections in there says most of your stories are wrong.
Okay.
That's the practice. And the reason that most of your stories are wrong is because of a thing called the fundamental attribution error. The fundamental attribution error, which is popular psychology term, and what it means is that I don't know the experience. Like you said, well, maybe it was a bad day or something. That's putting yourself and saying, we tend to do this. If somebody does something negative, we tend to assign their character. If they do something that, if we do something negative, we tend to assign it to our circumstances, our environment. Because we know our environment. I know that I'm having a struggle with this, and it's the best I can do. And your kind of question, assuming they're doing the best they can, what could be getting in the way is sort of taking it out of, well, that's the character of the person. He's a thief, he's a cheat, he's rude, or whatever. And the way that I really watch my stories, I'm not perfect, I'm human too, is the stories show themselves with absolute language. Here's what I mean. She never cleans her room. And then somebody will say, well, what about last Thursday? Well, yeah, but she never cleans her room. See, the story is like this filter that everything bounces off of. The conclusion is made, it's never happening. Therefore, I will not see that data until it would be a long string of continuous thing, and then I might admit that, okay, maybe she made a shift. But a one-time thing, that's an anomaly. Versus he's always great. It's that halo effect kind of thing too. Well, he's always really good. Well, that was just a bad day. So we tend to kind of, those stories reinforce themselves, especially if we're telling them to other people with the absence of corrective information. And so if you assume most of your stories are wrong, I know the times when I have been most upset, when I've actually taken action on it, I've most regretted it because that I find out those stories are wrong. When there's a big emotional hook, the stories are the things that I think create the emotion in us. It's not the event that occurs. It's the meaning we assign, which we assign all the time. Otherwise we'd go crazy. We have to make assumptions. But it's questioning those assumptions. If I think my story could be wrong, let me go in with curiosity. Let me go in asking questions that aren't like, why the hell did you do that? It's more like, what were you hoping to accomplish?
Yeah.
And they'd say, I was hoping to accomplish this. I kind of saw that it seemed to me you accomplished that. Oh, really? Oh, yeah, I could see that. Okay, so next time, what should we do? Different. So it's another phrase that somebody came up and said, you're great at appreciative inquiry. I'm like, what's appreciative inquiry? Well, that's where you have a line of questionings and you're being curious with basically a built-in assumption that the person can solve the problem. It's not that you're trying to beat them up, is you're trying to enable them because you believe they have capability. There's a lot of people who don't even say anything because they basically write the person off, which is about as rude as you can be. Oh, well, he's just, he's not going to get any better. Well, okay, you just removed the chance for him not only to get better, but he'll get better no matter what. And you're in as much of that box as he is. Because you don't get to tap the capability. So you're tapping in some key stuff, and I guess the thing that what I tried to do in the book really was I tried to bring these things all together in a way that was pretty easy. I mean, it's laid out even so that you do things where you see this principle, and then here's some practices under. Ideally, you'd work from yourself to others to the organization, but there's actually a section in the back that says, look, I don't have time for that. And you go to the back, and then you look through all the symptoms that you would see. Not a lack of vision is not a symptom. That's when people say, well, you don't have enough something, that's just a solution they're trying to impose. It might be the right thing, but the symptom would be if you don't have a vision that everybody's on, is that people are going in different directions. We're wasting lots of resources. We seem to have to retread things over and over again. Perhaps then having a conversation together about what you're trying to achieve and avoid and preserve, and then settle on those criteria. That's a solution to the challenges. So it's literally in the back. It's all the different things. So you look down there and go, here's what I'd see in me, here's what I'd see in the organization, and here's what I'd see in other people. And you just kind of go down through there like, oh, this is sounding familiar. Okay, then go back and work on that practice. Try a few exercises, see if because it's usually the things we don't know that are holding us back.
Yeah, and I do appreciate the fact that you have more resources than just what's in the book. So the audio recording podcast that you've done and stuff on the website has been really valuable because different people learn in different ways,
Yeah.
So we need to wrap it up. We're getting close to time here.
Oh, thanks for controlling the time. Good.
Yeah, but I just sort of wanted to get kind of the final word from you. For somebody who's really struggling and feeling confined by their situation and feel like they're just stuck, where would they start? What would be your advice?
Well, I like visual stuff. So if somebody's stuck, that to me basically says there's a little cool tool. It's really super simple. It takes a pen and a piece of paper. Suppose you could do with a mouse on a thing too. You draw a line down the paper, and you put whatever you're stuck on at the top. And then the left side, you write down what are the forces or capabilities that are helping push you in the direction you want to go.
Okay.
And then the right side, you put arrows down and put for each of those, and you can make them as, if it's a really big thing, you make a long arrow. If it's a little thing, you put a little arrow. That's getting in the way, that's pushing back. And what's interesting is when you do that, then if you want to get somebody to give you a sanity check, that's a cool thing, because frequently some of those, when you shine the light of day on them, it's fear. It's just fear embodied in I could lose my job or something like that. Well, okay, what's the real potential for that? Oh, that arrow just got small. Okay. And then how do you enhance the ones on the left side? Is it getting some help, some support, reading a book, taking action? What are those things you can do to build that to get you unstuck? I think that's a really good way to look at it, because that sort of gets it out of your head. Because people, I had a client one time who said this to me. He's like, when I'm in my head, I tend to spiral downwards negatively. Things get worse, and I'm losing my job and my wife, and it's this black hole kind of thing. And when you work with another person, I think, which you do as well, it's kind of getting it out of your head, and then you start hearing, well, that's not real, and there's maybe more possibility here, and even having somebody who's just listening. They don't even say anything, but just a place to listen. You can spiral upward and be more positive.
That's excellent.
So I think I'm trying to figure out, reality versus something else, and those are the kind of tools I try to throw in here, so you can just pull them out and move. The key thing is get into action. Don't just great thought experiment. Okay, go do something about it, because doing it will give you feedback about what's not for you.
There's one other thing that I would add to this, which is when you work with somebody else, have it be somebody who is supportive, open, and uplifting to you. Because I also find that there's tendency for people to hang out and bitch with each other, and you can then spiral downwards.
Yep. That's true. Misery does love company. Yeah, if we're going to just complain.
Yeah, and there's a time and place for that, I guess. But you've got to realize what's going on is that's going to drag you back. It's going to magnify the barriers. It's going to make things feel more insurmountable. You're going to feel validated, perhaps, but not empowered. The end result of conversations like that is to say, well, yeah, the world is really even more screwed up than I thought it was. And so, seek out somebody who can be in that more positive role, whether it's a friend or a coworker. Sometimes I've seen people use past bosses this way. If you have a boss that you really worked well with 3 years ago, seek them out, go buy them coffee and have a good conversation about it and say, I'm trying to work my way out of this funk that I'm in. And so anyway, that's just a little addition that I would put on to what you said there. I thought that was brilliant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even just getting out of our head, though, is going to help some of the fear is going to evaporate light, and you'll start to see a little more movement. And then getting positive support, not rah-rah cheerleading, but somebody who's going to actually help challenge you and support you in going the direction you need to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I wanted to thank you. I appreciate your time, Chris. It was great connecting up with you again. This is fantastic. And I did want to remind people that we do have shows on the first and third Wednesday of every month. So our next one will be the first week of February on February 3rd at noon Eastern time US. So if you want to connect in that way, you can also look for it on YouTube, which is where we'll be posting these things after the fact. So I just wanted to say thanks to everyone. Thank you, Chris. I do appreciate your time. I thought this was quite valuable today.
Thanks, Carl. I appreciate the conversation. I look forward to more.
All right. Take care, man. Have a good time.
All right. Okay.
We'll
Bye-bye.
Bye.